The first thing I saw when I pulled into the driveway wasn't my house. It was my life, scattered across the front yard. My clothes fluttered from the hedges. Family photos were face down in the grass. My books lay open in muddy puddles. My laptop bag had been ripped open, its contents dumped across the sidewalk. Half the neighborhood stood outside pretending they weren't watching. Then I heard my father's voice. "There she is." He stormed across the lawn, his face red with rage. "You're 28 years old and bleeding this family dry. We're done carrying you." Before I could answer, my older sister Melissa grabbed another box from the porch and hurled it toward the street. It burst open. My late mother's jewelry box rolled onto the pavement. Melissa laughed. "Maybe now you'll finally grow up." Several neighbors exchanged uncomfortable looks, but nobody stepped in. I had just finished a 14-hour hospital shift. My scrubs were stained, my feet throbbed, and I hadn't eaten since sunrise. None of that mattered to them. Dad pointed toward my car. "Load your junk and get out. You are no longer welcome here." I slowly picked up the jewelry box, brushing dirt from its cracked lid. Then I calmly loaded every box into my trunk. Not once did I argue. Not once did I raise my voice. That seemed to irritate them even more. Melissa folded her arms. "Seriously? You're not even going to cry?" I closed my trunk, looked each of them directly in the eyes. Then I spoke. "Sleep well tonight." The entire yard fell silent. "Because soon, none of you will." Dad laughed. Melissa rolled her eyes. They thought it was an empty threat. They had absolutely no idea what those words actually meant. I drove away. 10 days later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Dad, Melissa, unknown numbers. Voicemail after voicemail. Please answer. We need to talk. You have to come back." And for the first time in my life, they were the ones begging me. But that's not where this story began. 3 months earlier, when people looked at me, they saw the disappointing daughter. I lived at home, drove an old sedan, worked long hospital shifts, never bought expensive clothes, never went on vacations. To my family, that meant one thing: failure. What they never cared to understand was why I lived that way. Every extra dollar I earned disappeared into investments, legal fees, and a project I'd spent years building. I never explained myself. Because I couldn't. Not yet. Dad constantly reminded everyone how much he had sacrificed for me. If it weren't for me, he'd say at every family dinner, she'd be homeless. Melissa loved joining in. "You'll still be living here when you're 40. Everyone laughed, even relatives. I simply smiled. Remember that detail, it matters later. The truth was, Dad hadn't paid a single one of my bills in years. I bought my own groceries, paid my own insurance, covered most household utilities without anyone noticing. Whenever something broke, I quietly replaced it. The washing machine, the water heater, even the roof repairs. Dad accepted the money without ever admitting where it came from, then bragged to everyone about being the family's provider. That was his favorite lie. Melissa was different. She never worked longer than a few months before quitting. Dad always rescued her, paid her rent, covered her debts, bought her cars. Yet somehow, I was the burden. It never made sense. Then one evening I overheard something. Dad and Melissa were sitting in the kitchen. Dad sighed. "We're almost out of money." Melissa shrugged. "Then sell the house." Dad shook his head. "We can't." "Why not?" He looked toward the hallway to make sure I wasn't listening. "Because technically," he lowered his voice, "it isn't mine." That sentence froze me. I quietly stepped away before they noticed. Something wasn't right. The next morning, I visited the attorney who had handled my mother's estate years earlier. He smiled the moment he saw me. "I've been wondering when you'd finally come." "What do you mean?" He opened a locked cabinet, removed a sealed envelope, then slid it across the desk. "Your mother instructed me to give you this only after you turned 28. My hands trembled. Inside was a letter, along with property documents, and something else, something that changed everything. My mother hadn't simply left me memories. She had left me the house, not part of it, all of it. The deed had been placed into a trust until my 28th birthday. Dad had been allowed to live there only under one condition. He had to maintain the property and never force me out. If he violated either condition, his lifetime occupancy rights ended immediately. I stared at the documents in disbelief. Everything suddenly made sense. Dad knew, Melissa knew. Neither of them expected me to find out. Nobody in that room knew the truth except the attorney. He looked at me carefully. "What would you like to do?" I folded the papers. "Nothing. Not yet." That was their first mistake. Days passed. Dad became crueler. Melissa mocked me constantly. Every insult became evidence. Every threat was documented. Security cameras captured everything. Neighbors witnessed everything. The attorney instructed me to stay calm. I did. Until the afternoon they threw me out. The moment Dad screamed those words in front of everyone, he violated the trust. Legally. Completely. They had no idea they had just destroyed their own future. The paperwork was filed the next morning. 10 days later, court officers arrived at the house. Dad laughed when they knocked. "I don't owe anybody money." The lead officer calmly handed him the documents. His smile disappeared. Melissa snatched the papers. "This has to be fake." The officer shook his head. "No, ma'am. The property owner has legally terminated your occupancy rights." Dad frowned. "What property owner?" The officer looked directly at him. "Your daughter." Silence. Complete silence. Melissa actually laughed. "Nice joke." The officer didn't smile. He simply pointed toward the driveway. A black SUV slowly pulled in. I stepped out, wearing a tailored navy suit instead of hospital scrubs. Beside me stood my attorney. Behind us came 2 movers and a locksmith. Dad stared at me as though he'd seen a ghost. "No," he whispered. "No, that's impossible." My attorney opened the folder. The trust became effective on her 28th birthday. He displayed the signed deed. Original signatures, official seals, everything undeniable. Neighbors gathered again. This time, they weren't watching me. They were watching my father unravel. Melissa's face turned pale. "You knew?" I nodded. "For weeks." Dad staggered backward. "You planned this," I answered quietly. "No. You planned it for me." Gasps echoed through the crowd. One neighbor actually covered her mouth. Another shook his head. Nobody defended Dad anymore. The officer spoke again. "You have 48 hours to vacate." Dad's knees nearly buckled. "This is my home." "No," I replied softly. "It was Mom's. And now it's mine." That was the moment everything changed. The investigation into Dad's finances uncovered years of unpaid taxes, unauthorized loans, and money he'd secretly borrowed using the home's equity while falsely claiming ownership. Melissa had signed several documents with him. Both became subjects of fraud investigations. Creditors descended almost immediately. The expensive SUV Dad loved, repossessed. Melissa's luxury apartment, gone within weeks. Friends who had praised them disappeared overnight. Funny how quickly loyalty fades when the truth comes out. As for me, I never moved back into the house. Too many painful memories lived inside those walls. Instead, I renovated it completely, then turned it into transitional housing for women escaping abusive homes. The place where I had once been humiliated became a place where others could start over. That meant far more than revenge ever could. Months later, I received one final letter from Dad. He apologized. Not for throwing me out, not for years of humiliation. He apologized for underestimating me. I never replied. Some lessons don't need an answer. They simply need consequences. The neighbors still tell the story of the afternoon they watched a daughter quietly pack her belongings after being publicly humiliated. What they remember most isn't my father's shouting, or Melissa's laughter. It's the calm look on my face when I said, "Sleep well tonight. Because soon, none of you will." They thought it was anger. It wasn't. It was certainty. Because the people who tried to throw me out never realized they were standing in someone else's home all along.